please take the roll.
Councilmember Danuski?
Here.
Councilmember Herbig? Here. Councilmember Curtis?
Excused.
Councilmember Sperry?
Here.
Councilmember Smith?
Excused.
Deputy Mayor Van Ness?
Here.
Mayor Baker?
Here.
Thank you.
We're lucky tonight. We've actually got a Boy Scout in the audience with us. And David, would you be so kind as lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? We'll all stand.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. If there are no changes or modifications or objections, the agenda will stand approved as written. Next item on the agenda. I'll tell you, this is kind of bittersweet. I'm very happy for Dr. Church because he's retiring, and I'm very sad for the community because we're going to lose a wonderful human being, so to speak. Well, yeah, I mean, we're sort of losing him right here at Pasteur, but he'll still be around. I don't mean we're losing him forever, my goodness. Okay, so tonight we have the privilege of honoring somebody who is truly a pillar of our community and a great leader. Dr. Church has led Pasteur University for 10 years now, and will be leaving the presidency this month. And your accomplishments in growing the university and its influence literally around the world are very impressive. I was at a NLC meeting, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, back on the East Coast, and I was talking to some constituents about Kenmore. And they just couldn't picture where Kenmore was, the north end of Lake Washington. They knew it was Seattle area somewhat. And I mentioned Pasteur, and they said, "Oh, Pasteur University, we know that one." And they said, "We just dropped one of our children off there to go to school." So Pasteur, people do know of the wonderful things and the programs at Pasteur University. So I always get great pleasure when I travel to talk about Pasteur and Kenmore. And you'd be surprised at the recognition. And you've embraced many opportunities for the city of Kenmore and the university to partner on so many different fronts. The ball field lease that serves local children and their families, opening up the campus for the arts of Kenmore, the annual show, and supporting the city's community events and other initiatives that are seriously too numerous to mention. Pasteur is just always there. And I've got a feeling that they're always there because of you and your leadership. And so we truly, truly appreciate everything that you've done for this community. Several years ago, Dr. Church and I made a presentation at the International Town and Gown Association's annual conference about the evolution and strength of the partnership between the university and the city's largest employer and the city. The International Town and Gown Association's purpose is to encourage and share best practices in building relationships between higher education institutions and the cities where they're located. And the partnership that we treasure today with Pasteur is because of Dan Church and his leadership. I remember that conference. We asked if you would do it, and there was no hesitation. You said, "Of course I'd do it." So that was really good. So we do thank you for that. And we're very pleased to honor you, and we're delighted that so many of your colleagues from the university have joined us tonight. And council members, anybody else want to make any comments? You want to start, Lori?
Well, thank you, Dr. Church. You have done so much for this community, and I couldn't help but think about some of the personal stories, if you will. And I actually met you before you started officially in your office. I was running for council, so it was a decade ago, and you had just gotten back from Dubai, and I believe a birth of a grandchild. And so that was my introduction to Dr. Church. And from that, it was very positive. I think when I was thinking about reflecting upon your leadership style, and I felt like the word gracious, because in all these different situations I've seen you over the years, you're so gracious. The last couple of years, my son actually works at Bastyr. Actually, he got married at the chapel, and then next year went on staff as in supporting. So I would often go up and see my son and have lunch at the cafeteria, which, by the way, is the best kept secret in Kenmore. I highly recommend it. And every time I'd go by, there's Dr. Church in his window office, and I'd wave, and no matter what he was doing, he always waved and smiled. So, I just feel like that's part of that grace-filled. And I do wish you the best. Bastyr has grown and prospered under your time. I mean, you have a whole nother campus in San Diego, and I have a feeling that your retirement will be in name only. You will be busy. Anyway, thank you so much for the person that you are and all you've done for this community.
Councilmember Herbie?
I don't have a lot to add, but I do want to thank you for bringing Bastyr to Kenmore and making it one of the most important institutions we have here. I know it's something we're all very proud of, and I wish you all the best in your retirement.
Councilmember Danuski?
So it's been well set up here. Thank you for your service, and basically, through your leadership, we went from a college in Kenmore to Kenmore's College, and everybody just feels a part of Bastyr. So thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Yes, Lori and I ran for council for the first time back in 2005, I guess it was, and it was the time you were coming to Bastyr. And I remember you had Randy Eastwood and I for a breakfast in your office, or maybe it was a lunch, I don't know, but it was a vegan meal, which was, I thought, oh my goodness, how am I going to have it? But it was delicious, yeah. And it was a very, very pleasant visit. And I thought at the time, this Dr. Church is going to be a new dawn for Bastyr University. And it has proved to be so. Last week, David and I were down in Salt Lake City at a meeting at National League of Cities committees, all the 8 or 10 different committees that National League of Cities have. I'm on the Transportation Infrastructure Committee. David's on Information Technology, whatever. But 2 days before, there was a University Communities Committee that met for a day and a half. And everybody in that meeting introduced themselves and talked about their relationship with the universities that they had, or colleges that they had in their cities or towns. And there were some positive comments, but a lot of problems came to light that they had with a college town and all the students and the relationships between all the people associated with the university and the city itself. And I thought to myself, as people were asking all these things, Bastyr's been a good neighbor. We've got all sorts of great things we do together and partner together. And I thought to myself, when I came to my turn, I said, yes, we have Bastyr University, the world's leading naturopathic university in our city. And we have a great relationship, and I'm here because I want to make it even better. And there were some things that came out of that meeting that we might look into here in Kenmore. But generally, it's been a wonderful experience here the last 10 years as I have grown into civic life here at the city of Kenmore. At the same time, I've seen the relationship between the university, Bastyr University, and the city and the citizens continually improve over those 10 years. And a lot of that relationship that is developed is because of Dr. Church, and I thank you and wish you the best in your retirement.
I guess I can take a little bit of liberty here because there's somebody else here that served on the council that spent a lot of time working with Dr. Church, the university, and working through a lot of the issues that we initially had before the leadership became as wonderful as it is. The Honorable Glenn Rogers. Glenn, would you like to say a word?
No, I don't think so.
I know you're rather quiet.
One thing that's nice about being on this side of the podium or the dais is I can wear slippers jeans, aloha shirts, and feel right at home. I think the one thing that's come across to all of us is the word relationship. Dan Church has been stellar in his ability to do the business of the city, with the city, despite the city. We've had our tough times, and when he came on board, I personally took it as a breath of fresh air, because with the man came direction, as far as I was concerned, good positive direction. He gave himself to learning about the city before coming in and talking about the city. He gave himself to his staff and his students and poured himself into the community there before getting involved in the city. But once he did, the relationship just grew and grew and grew. We're no longer business cohorts, we're family. And so for that, we are thankful for all your service and for your being able to meld the different generations of kids, the different generations of businessmen, the council, and just making the city what it is. Bastyr is part of Kenmore. When we first got involved with Bastyr, we were wondering if you guys were leaving town. But you stuck it out. You took the good, the bad, and the ugly and stuck it out. And for that, I am well pleased, because you are part of the community. You are Kenmore. People associate Kenmore with Bastyr, Bastyr with Kenmore. So thank you for all your service. Thanks for the relationships that have grown up. Thanks for taking us from younger people to a bit older people like David. But thank you for all your service. We really, really do appreciate it as a city, myself as a citizen and a friend.
So in honor of your leadership in community partnership, the City of Kenmore is bestowing a recognition that is a first for our city. We are pleased to present you Daniel K. Church, the key to the City of Kenmore, and we thank you and wish the family the best. So, Dr. Church, if you would like to say a few words, please. Wherever you want to stand, please do.
Probably get the earth here. I have this wonderful background, which is eroding down. I am never without some words that the elements presents. I first want to remark on the fact that this key is stuck on here and it won't open. I already tried to get it off, but it doesn't work. So. Not meaning to be facetious about this at all. Very touching to be honored in this way. And it's very flattering to have your affirmation and your friendship and support. I do have a lot of memories of some times together with virtually every one of you. It's been sort of a growing up experience for me. I was already old when I got here, and now I'm just 10 years older than that. And Kenmore was brand new as a town, although many people in this room tonight have already lived here for a long time. But Bastyr University and we all together, I think, have had maybe an adolescent phase or two in the last decade, and the maturation in the city is, it not only matches, I think it outshines what has happened at Bastyr University. It's just been such a pleasure to be in this town when these things have happened, and the strength of this community just is very, very impressive. I have actually lived in a couple of other town gown relationships. Many years ago, a tenured professor at Seattle Pacific University, whose town, if you will, is the Queen Anne neighborhood. And it wasn't quite as cozy as we have learned to become here in Kenmore. Then in the Midwest, with a little Quaker college in Canton, Ohio, and wonderful, long tradition of decades of relationship, but issues that made it very challenging. And you all have just made it very, very easy. And I feel fortunate to have been at Bastyr for this period of time. Well, the university has done well. I didn't make that happen. I was lucky to be here when some good things did happen. And I'm as impressed as you are, perhaps even more, at how many Bastyr folks came. And I'm so glad you're here, because this gives me a chance to once again say how you did this, I didn't. It's very embarrassing to be honored in front of the people who actually did the work. So my colleagues who are seated here, a large number of them, our board chair, I didn't know you were there, Sam, my gosh, and another trustee back here, Mr. Cunningham. And these folks have been in the traces every day making this happen. I've gotten to go to the parties and do some fun things, but the slogging work of actually making a relationship work is something that we've shared, and I'm very touched that you all are here. It's been a good ride, and I will come back from time to time. We have already moved away, although I'm still working till the 30th, and we're in temporary quarters. When I come back, I'm bringing my key. I'm going to see what happens when I try at the door. Thank you so very much.
Now, we also have one more small gift for you. It's a baseball cap, so that when you're out in the sun, you can shade your eyes. And
it's already too
with the
late.
logo there.
Thank you, man.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, a few minutes and have a little cake, a little refreshments, and sit and chat and thank Dr. Church for everything that he's managed to accomplish. I know that it's the staff that does the work. Trust me. We have a tremendous staff here who does all the work and makes us look good. But he's the leader. And you guys do the work because he provides the direction. So, thank you. If we can sort of get this back into order again and get moving. So, next item on the agenda is a presentation from Sound Transit on Sound Transit 3. So if you care to come forward, that would be great. Yes, right there at the table, wherever you want to be. Have you got any type of video presentation, or you do have a slideshow, PowerPoint? Wonderful.
Great. Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Deputy Mayor, members of the council. Thank you for having us here this evening. And my name is Matthew Bott, and I serve as a Government and Community Affairs Officer for really all of East King County. And so my role is to help represent the agency to this part of the region and to be a conduit and a resource for you as you interact with the agency on policy making, planning, et cetera. So we're pleased to be here. I'm joined by my colleague Chris Rule, who will take the second part of this presentation and get into some specifics I know you and your citizens are interested in terms of the ST3 planning process that we are right in the middle of. So we're excited to talk about that. So I was asked to give a quick background of the agency, where we're at, where we come from, where our projects are right now, and then, as I mentioned, I'll turn it over to Chris to go through some specifics. So just as an overview for the agency, Sound Transit, as you know, is a regional operator of train and bus services. Our mission is to improve the way people get around and between major employment and population centers. Our district stretches over 1,080 square miles, encompassing the urban areas of Pierce, King, and Snohomish counties, and a total of 52 cities within our within our service area. We're governed by an 18-member board of directors made up of county and local officials, as well as the Secretary of Transportation who sits on our board of directors. About 3 million people are who we serve, which is about 40% of the state's entire population. The three types of service that we operate are Sound Transit Express buses, which connect major population centers. We rely on local transit agencies to feed riders into our regional system, and we contract with them to operate and maintain this service. Sounder commuter trains, 2 lines, Sounder North from Everett to Seattle and Sounder South from Lakewood to Seattle. And then, of course, light rail. Our Tacoma Link is a 1.6-mile line in downtown Tacoma, and then Central Link, what we now call Link, operates between downtown Seattle and the airport. We also invest in a number of other projects, and to date we have made more than $5 billion in infrastructure investments, including direct access ramps, park and rides, HOV lanes, sidewalks, etc. So that's sort of what we do, where we come from. Just a quick overview. The next slide, Chris. So here's a snapshot of our ridership. We are, for a region of this size, we're a very young agency. And I do, starting in 1999 with 1.4 million riders, you can see our trend line going from there. It's increased pretty steadily over the past 14 years as we brought on more services, and of course as the population of this region grows substantially. In 2014 we carried 32 million riders, and we'll see significant growth as we open the 3 new stations, which I'll talk about in a second: Capitol Hill, and then the University Station to the north, and then Angle Lake Station to the south, going down towards Tacoma. We provide about 100,000 rides every weekday on our trains and buses. As you know, our Link Light Rail operates at its own grade for the most part. So these are separate than single occupancy vehicles, and allows for more throughput, especially in heavily congested areas, as we know. We coordinate very closely with our partners, as I mentioned, with King County Metro, Community Transit, and Pierce Transit. It's a major priority of the agency to continue to operate in an integrated fashion as best we can to stretch available tax dollars and expand our ridership footprint collectively across our growing region. Next slide, please. So our history really revolves around 2 capital programs that were approved by voters, the first in 1996 and the second again in 2008, which we call ST2. ST2 was primarily a plan to extend light rail, and I'll get into sort of where those investments have taken place and where they are currently. Currently we have 16 miles of light rail in service from Seattle to SeaTac, as I mentioned previously, and we are also expanding light rail around the region in a few different corridors to serve the population and build out the entire system. So let me jump into University Link and our station there. This is really a key station as we grow north. Service is scheduled to open in the first quarter of 2016. We're 6 months early than previously scheduled, and approximately $150 million under budget. Capitol Hill and the University Station are underground stations, so you can't really see all the work up top. It's all underneath, tunneling projects. We received over $800 million in federal grants for this project, and this is really these are the next steps in building the system northward, and I'll talk about sort of what comes afterwards, and then what we're studying further is what Chris will get into. So the Northgate Link, a 4.3-mile light rail link extension, includes the University District, Roosevelt neighborhood, and the Northgate station. Trains will run in underground tunnels from downtown Seattle to a site along I-5, south of the Northgate station. They'll come out of the tunnels to serve the elevated Northgate station from there. Construction is underway, and trains will be running, we estimate, in 2021. This link is projected to add over 60,000 daily riders to the link system, bringing total daily ridership to just under 180,000 in 2030. And then Linwood Link. The board has selected its preferred corridor. This is a close to a 9-mile extension that runs from Northgate to Linwood with anticipated stops in Shoreline, Mount Lake Terrace, and Linwood. Construction is set to begin in 2018, and trains are expected to be running by 2023. We're also applying for a federal grant to help supplement local tax dollars, and we have a pretty good track record in that, as that concerns. And then East Link, which is the major project into East King County. County. Planning is underway. There is pre-construction occurring now, and in 2016 we'll begin our heavy civil construction. That's a line that runs from downtown Seattle over across the bridge into Mercer Island, into Bellevue, and then through Redmond. It is a total of 14 miles and I believe 10 stations serving those cities. This is the agreement and partnership we've had with these cities is pretty extensive. You might have read about 2 months ago, about a month ago, there was a major MOU signed between the city of Bellevue and Sound Transit, finalizing a number of components of that project, and we're looking forward to moving forward and getting it online in 2023 to serve our customers. And let me go into the South 200 link just briefly. Just project south of here. This is a 1.6-mile extension from SeaTac to Angle Lake, 44% complete and approximately $20 million under budget at this time. Construction began in 2014 and will conclude and begin running, we estimate, in 2016. And Federal Way link extension. Currently funding will extend about 8 miles south from the future Angle Lake station at South 200th and SeaTac to Kent, Des Moines by 2023. So 2023 is a big date of opening for us across the region. And then a little bit on Tacoma Link briefly, and then I'll turn it over to my colleague. This is a 2.4-mile extension, including stations along South Stadium Way, Division Avenue, and MLK to the Hilltop District. And that's, I think, what I'll share with that. Chris is going to get into the ST3 planning process and sort of how, and then we'll talk a little bit about how you can continue to engage with the agency and share what your citizens are interested in studying and the board considering for a potential vote in the fall of 2016. So,
thank you, Matt, and thanks again, council members, for hosting us. Okay, there we go. So, as Matt mentioned, we're in the process of delivering 2 light rail extensions approved by the voters, and I wanted to share a little bit more with you about how you can engage on a potential 3rd expansion, which could start with a vote as early as November of next year. So I like to think of this as about an 18-month process in 3 parts. The first part we had earlier this year was about 6 months of thinking about what kind of plan would we present to our voters. And so our board members went through the process of determining what are the criteria by which we would evaluate the next projects. So we looked at things like transit-oriented development, ridership, serving a variety of communities throughout the region. Now we're in the process of what projects could go into the plan. Next year, we will be looking at draft plans and looking at how those projects interact with one another. So the star on this timeline in 2015 is where we are now, and as you can see, there's a public engagement and involvement period going on at this time. So we are in the process of gathering feedback on our draft priority projects list. From there, our board would advance that for further study, and we'd be looking at, okay, what could be the conceptual costs and ridership of these projects and other characteristics according to the criteria our board have defined. Next year would be how do those plans work together? How do we finance those within the allotted budget that we can obtain using the taxing authority that the legislature grants us? We're currently in the process of seeking additional taxing authority, and we also need to determine, using our public outreach process, how big a package does the public want to support. So as far as the draft priority projects list, it's drawn from hundreds of projects that were studied as part of our environmental impact statement last year, and there are hundreds of those that are consistent with our long-range plan, which is more about a financially unconstrained look at the lines on the map out into the future. For example, SR 522 is defined as a high-capacity transit corridor, which could one day be either bus rapid transit or light rail. So this really sets the beginning for developing the financially constrained plan that we would present before the voters next year. So we will take each of these projects into developing a template which would show the public, our board, other stakeholders, all of the characteristics and the scope of each of those corridors. So some of these projects were deferred projects we weren't able to complete because of the dip in revenue because of the recession. We lost about 30% of our sales tax revenue. Some of them are enhancements supporting our existing system as we move out into the future. Some are those that we've studied with some planning money that was included in the last ballot measure. That includes extensions out to Everett and Tacoma and east out into downtown Redmond. System-wide programs. These are system-wide enhancements like bus service and other smaller projects that aren't the large billion-dollar corridors you might that might be the big ticket items, and facilities and services supporting our systems, such as capacity improvements at existing stations. So some of these, there are about 50 of them, and some of those that might be of interest to Kenmore would be a Northern Lake Washington HCT crossing study. Eastlink is building light rail across I-90. What could the future hold for 520 or the 522 corridor? Or some activists are proposing even a third crossing of the lake in between. On our draft priority projects list, we have a study to examine the access and connection to the 145th Street light rail station, which will be built as part of the Linwood Link extension, and how that might connect here to SR 522. As well, there are infill light rail stations at 130th and 220th that were studied as part of and approved to be part of the Linwood Link project, but not funded at this time. Additional express bus service would be studied, including the Route 522. On the east side, there's also the Kirkland, Bellevue to Issaquah light rail corridor that we did some study of last year, but we will continue to study, as well as an I-405 bus rapid transit corridor that is somewhat in conjunction with WashDOT's plan for building that out. So there are a number of opportunities to get involved. June 4th through July 8th, we're in the middle of a large outreach campaign to the public. We have a website including a survey at soundtransit3.org. This week and next week, there are a series of public meetings. July 23rd, we'll be presenting the input so far that we've received to our board. Late August, we'll be updating the list with all of the input we've received, and in the fall and winter, we'll be finishing the evaluation of all those projects. So here's a list of all of those public meetings. The first is tomorrow in Seattle. Matt, I'll be there. I'll also be in Everett. Matt will be in Redmond if you happen to travel over there. There are also a few others throughout the region. So thanks, and wanted to leave some minutes for questions.
Let me mention one thing. I think you're all aware of this, but we asked jurisdictions to respond with a statement or letter of interest by the 15th of July to share what your priorities would be, whether you support the projects that are already on the list, which we can share with you, or if you have some others that you believe the board should consider. But this is a very important time for our region and for our agency to just think about what are the next steps in ST3 and possibly in a future ballot measure even after that as the region grows in the way it's expected to. So
I know that I think earlier this year that President, the chair, Mayor Balducci had indicated that she expressed some interest in looking at light rail coming up the 522 corridor, and I know that we've put together some issues that were very important to us. and I don't know if you've seen them yet, and I'm not sure how much they're going to be modified in the future, but we're very concerned with bus rapid transit along the 522 corridor and also the 145th Street corridor, because we think it's very important to get people to the light rail. We're also concerned with park and ride facilities somewhere here on the 522 corridor, because we're taxed now. The limited park and ride that we have in Kenmore, and I know in other areas, it's full by 7 o'clock in the morning, if not before. So looking at those 4 different things, I think are some of the things that are very important to us. Questions, comments? Councilmember Sperry.
Well, I think one of the things I'd like to kind of go back a little bit, and you've obviously brought some projects on board, and what are sort of the lessons learned in terms of people utilizing these light rails and the links that have been opened? Specifically, the mayor just talked about how park and rides, where people have to drive to trains and that kind of thing. Are you finding, what are the things that are stopping people from using these? I mean, I don't know, are they 100% capacity? I mean, what are some of the things that you guys have learned with your projects about how people utilize them, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Access to our facilities is certainly a concern that a lot of people have expressed, because we are serving a very large region. Park and rides are an important piece of the services we provide. And there is a delicate balance between expanding the system further and providing more access, including park and rides, and expansion of those park and rides. So we have several projects incorporated currently that would expand park and rides and other forms of access, whether it's pedestrian, bike, bus transfers. And we're looking at this early level at our project templates to do a better job of incorporating access planning and facilities in the future projects. Because we're serving a variety of urban and suburban destinations, and to find the right mix of park and ride or walking access and everything in between for the mix of people who ride our services is something that we're going to continue to analyze.
Do people, one of the things that I've heard is that people don't like mixed modes. In other words, they don't want to get on a bus and then get on a train. I don't know if that holds true for walking or biking. I don't know if that does. Is that anything that you're finding? I mean, is it mostly...
Well, most of the literature would say that about a half a mile is your general walking radius for a really high quality transit project, maybe even up to a mile. Our study would think that most transit transfers are, if they are high quality transfers without a long wait in between, are things that people will tolerate. And we're doing our best to coordinate with Metro so that in situations where people are transferring services, those are good connections that are making transit competitive with driving and other ways of accessing destinations.
So like the bus rapid transit or something that could connect you to a link or something, I don't know.
Right.
Would that be one way of doing it? Okay. Thank you.
A lot of it is, excuse me, as Chris mentioned, a function of just the growth of the system, moving from fixed thoroughfares with the light rail, and then how do you redeploy buses so there's not duplication in a bus and a train coming down together? How do you redeploy those service hours in coordination with another agency so the reach and the expand and those dollars are used to bring in more folks to access the system? That's, I wouldn't say a lesson learned, but just a function of the growth of the system. But I think getting to what you're looking at is what's next and different, and that's a priority of the board and the board chair. The other thing I would share also is one of the board's priorities is transit-oriented development and making decisions that can help catalyze that for communities. So you'll hear a lot about what, and on the templates you'll see specifically what the different investments and different corridors will do to help catalyze TOD, transit-oriented development, to help support density, which will one helps meet growth management targets for our partner communities, but two helps our ridership substantially. So that's another sort of lesson learned or piece that's next in our priorities.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor?
Thank you. As I mentioned, David and I were down at, the mayor and I were down at Salt Lake for a meeting of all the committees of the National League of Cities, and I serve on the Transportation Infrastructure Committee. We had a lot of discussions about rapid bus transportation versus rail versus more highways and all that sort of thing. One thing that came out in the discussion, and I don't know the references and the research, but those communities, metropolitan areas that have invested in bus rapid transit are not seeing the same economic development that occurs around light rail stations. And the logic there seemed to be that a light rail station is a permanent thing, whereas the bus may go away. And so developers look at a bus rapid transit system and they can't count on it for a long period of time. So they're less likely to make massive investments in housing and commercial development where they do that around light rail stations. Salt Lake City has just done a marvelous job with their system, and they're still building it out. But you can get all over that town on that light rail, and it works well. And there's been, as the mayor said, Mayor Balducci had commented on the possibility of light rail coming through the 522 corridor. And there's been talk about connecting all the universities around the lake with light rail, and continuing through Kenmore on to UW-Bothell and Cascadia and so on down to Bellevue Community College and so on. It would be sensible for us I would think, to have light rail in our future if it's at all possible. And light rail, as I mentioned to you earlier in the meeting, before the meeting started, if it doesn't go here, there, and everywhere, then you're limited in what you can do with it. But in communities in metropolitan areas like Boston and Washington, D.C., hey, people don't want cars. They get everywhere they want to go on that rail system. And I can see someday in Seattle's future that would be there. Right now you can get from Seattle downtown to the airport with 13 stops in between, but you can't get from the University District to Ballard. And you won't even after all this ST2 gets built out. You can't get from Kenmore to the light rail station at 145th. First of all, there isn't a bus route that goes that way, but maybe you'd have a BRT that would go that way, and it would help. But you'd still need a place for the cars to get to the bus. And as David said, we're maxed out on our park and ride here, and they had been using the old park and ride where now apartments are going in, so they've been displaced from there. And now they're down at Kenmore Village here, and a lot of them are parking there and walking to the bus. That's going to be going away shortly. I don't know where all these people are going to park to use your service. Somehow they've got to get to your service. And so a parking garage in the Kenmore area, maybe along with a light rail station, would just be super. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Councilmember Herbig.
I'm a huge fan of the work you guys are doing. I wish that we had not turned away the federal money back in the 60s or 70s and given it to Atlanta, because the region would be much better off if we had started this years ago. That said, I'm somebody who used to commute on the 522 every day. I drive on 522 every day right now. And as you probably know, 522 carries more cars every day than Aurora does. It's a congested, it's frankly a horrendous drive every single morning to get through, just to get down to 145th. And I think if there is a new corridor to really look into and invest in, I think 522 makes a really strong case for that, because the buses were packed, and this was 7-8 years ago, I was taking the 522 every day. It was packed. I can't imagine what they're like now with how traffic is. So I would urge strongly that that there's a closer look given to the 522 corridor for BRT or light rail down the line.
Yeah, I guess it's very frustrating to know that we're going to have this great station go in at 145th Street. They are not going to do anything with parking. 500 stalls, that's it. We have absolutely no way to get people from Kenmore, Bothell, Woodinville, Monroe to the light rail station. It doesn't exist. That's why I think it's imperative that bus rapid transit, it's already a high-capacity transit corridor, that bus rapid transit is provided on the 522 corridor and the 145th Street corridor. I mean, it's important because this is a large developing area that continues to expand, that has to have access. And certainly we anticipate at some point Sound Transit or whatever organization in the future ends up getting light rail around the lake, connecting the campuses together. We've got great transportation to get to Seattle. I mean, we've got 3 different bus lines. You're going to have light rail coming. Try to get to Bellevue. Try to get to Newcastle. You can't do it. So, anyway. Anybody else? Councilmember Danuski.
So basically, my colleagues have said it all. We love the idea of the 145th station. We need to get there, and with all the toll diversions, and 405 is going to make traffic even worse. If I drive, my own private vehicle, I get off at 145th. It could take me 25 minutes just to get to Kenmore, and that's only going to get worse. And we'd love people to be able to get to the station and use the station, but the way the roads are now, it's not going to happen. So, thank you.
One piece of advice, if I may, I think the more you can push out to your citizens the survey that we've put out there, so our board can see the citizens of Kenmore are concerned with this and are focused. I mean, I think the more of that, the better. Everyone received a mailer in the mail. Hopefully there's some good presence at the open house, but really make sure that these voices are coming through in every channel you can, and we're happy to capture them.
Yeah, no, we hear you loud and clear. We have a special meeting here on Wednesday night talking about ST3 with the community. We've invited people certainly from Kenmore and from Lake Forest Park to join us. We have strong interest from the university here in Kenmore, and we also have strong interest from Cascadia and UW with the students. So you will be hearing from all of the communities on the 522 corridor.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks. You very much. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
yes.
if I could just, for the people who are in the audience, that meeting on the 17th begins at 7?
7 o'clock.
And
here in the
at
council
8,
chambers.
Here at the council.
And this is very, very important to our community. This is the planning. This is what is going to determine what we have in this community for transportation for some years to come. So it's important that your voices are heard. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Next item on the agenda is citizen comments. This is an opportunity to express your views on issues that are important to you and to the community. We ask that you limit your comments to 3 minutes. And if the clerk will please call the first person.
John Kropp.
My name is John Kropp from the Shoreline. Sorry. Our business used to be here.
That's okay. If you could just state your address, that'd be great.
350 North 190th Street. I handed out some, hope you have them. I'd like you to hide the whole thing to the first minute. We have a New York City study that said that if you increase the speed of commute by 10%, the time of commute, you'll increase the economy by up to 20%. And the other was a TCRP 35, which came out in 1999, tells you how to attract riders out of their car or into the car. So those are the two main things that you should look at if you get a chance. I left the thing on there. Now, have I talked that long already? Oh my gosh, I'm going to be fumbling around. At any rate, I'd like you to take a look at the times and then number 2. If you flip that up to the number 2, there, minute 2, the bus goes at 12 miles an hour. The Everett Speedway had been there since 1950 that I remember it, 2.67 times faster. The light rail is 20 miles an hour the average, and that would be 1.6 times faster. And the streetcar is 6.4 times faster. If you had a taxi system, it would be equivalent to that or higher, depending on how you allow it. So now if we look at the wait time, and that's something that was discussed a little bit here, multimodal wait time is going to be a good 15, 20 minutes. By the time you can come out of the station and get to another one. I talked to the bus, 30 seconds to make one passenger stop, 90 seconds to do a bicycle, and 2.5 minutes to do a wheelchair. Now, how long is it going to take to do that transfer from a light rail to a bus or to whatever other thing you're going to do? It's going to take about 20 minutes altogether. If you look at it, you got to park. If you're at a park and ride, the parking is a congestion maker. And I'd love to give a presentation where I can have time to go into each one of these little things, show you the time and how much problem that you have. I'd love you to I'll try to get to this meeting on Wednesday. But thank you. I guess my time's up, and sorry it took so long.
Thank you, Mr. Kopf.
I have copies of what you have if any of the people out here would like to have.
Levy?
Mayor and council members, good evening. I'm Doug Levy. My address is 15619 62nd Place Northeast. I'm a board member of the Families for Active Parks in Kenmore, but I'm here tonight primarily speaking to you with my own voice. And I know you're going to have this agenda item later on from the folks at Burke and Associates, the preliminary outline of a conversation about what you may look to do as you have these conversations about regional transportation needs, about local transportation in parks and open space. And so I realize you're just dipping your toe into that, but my prodding to all of you is don't dip your toe into all of that and don't be timid. My prodding to all of you is that I hope the result of this is that you will go forward boldly in 2016. I think the first question you have to ask yourselves as elected officials trying to make decisions for this community is whether there's a need. I don't think any of you should have trouble answering that question. If you think about the local transportation system, the local parks and open space needs in this community, they're tremendous, they're urgent. As you talk to officials from Sound Transit about 522, remember that on the local side of things, you have a need to get people to State Route 522. For those of us that struggle down that hill to make it that far, the bridge over the Sammamish Slough is not going to fix itself. It's not going to improve itself. Kenmore on the parks and open space side is without a pool. We're often sending kids to other communities for ball games, for ball fields, for soccer. I just did a bike ride in Woodinville last weekend and drove by one very nice ball field complex and rode my bike right past another one and thought to myself, why in the world can't we be doing that in Kenmore someday, riding on the trail right here with recreation opportunities right here? we can, but we have to make that investment. So as you think about this, it shouldn't be a question of whether you go forward, but I think your task is how you go forward. And in that vein, I'd like to suggest to you, we often fall in love with descriptions of grants and how we can get outside money, and I'm in that business a little bit. And I would tell you not to fall in love with the idea that you can just go get grants from the state or even worse from the federal government. If you want to really do right by this community for the future, for infrastructure investment, you're going to need to make those investments yourselves. People never like to pay up front for infrastructure investment, but if you give them a product and you give them value, this is a community where people will make those choices and they'll make the right one. So I would urge you to think about both of those things and don't leave either one at the curb. And I thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Levy.
There's no one else signed up.
Anybody else wishing to be heard? Anybody else wishing to be heard? Thank you very much, Mr. Koff. Thank you for your information on the SkyTrain, and Mr. Levy, thank you very much for your comments. And we certainly will be acting on this tonight and in the future. Next item on our agenda is the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve? And I'll second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The consent agenda stands approved unanimously. Next item on the agenda is the business agenda and threshold decision approving further review of a development agreement with Bastyr University. Ms. Spence, Community Development Director.
Good evening, Council. So procedurally, when there's a request for a development agreement, Council needs to take action to authorize staff to further review the development agreement. So that's the action that we're looking for this evening, a motion from Council to authorize staff to continue review of a potential development agreement with Bastyr University. The purpose of that development agreement would be to extend the master plan for a period of 5 years. The master plan was approved in 2009 for a 10-year period, and Bastyr is interested in extending that time period an additional 5 years, and that's the only change that is currently requested. Everything that is in the currently adopted master plan will remain the same, just the term would be extended. So that's the reason why we're here tonight. The other item that we would like to bring forward would be extending the ball field lease on the Bastyr campus for an additional 5-year period. That again was approved in 2009 for a 10-year period, and there's interest in extending that lease. That lease could be included in the development agreement. It also could come forward as a separate action for approval. So if Council authorises staff to proceed with further review of the development agreement, we would like to bring that back to you on June 29th. As it is a fairly simple amendment, we feel we could bring that forward quickly for your consideration. So June 29th is not a typical Council meeting, and we would like to make sure that we have Council members here, because approval of a development agreement does require a majority of the Council to authorise that. So that's why I'm here tonight. And any questions? Thank you.
Questions? Councilmember Sperry.
Yes, I do have 2 questions. So I know that we just changed our rules on development agreements. So if we, for some reason, I know it's 5 votes if 7 are here. If there's less than 7, is it still 5 votes? I guess that's more of a legal question.
I'm going to leave that to the attorney. I think it says a majority plus 1.
I have the code available on my iPad. I will look that up, but I believe it's a total of 5, but I'll have to check it out.
Okay, that would be good to know.
Right back to you.
And then is there any, as far as separating out the two, the ball field agreement and the development agreement? I know that last time they were, the timing was very similar. but I don't think it was included in the development agreement.
Council approved a master plan in 2009. It was a separate action for the ball field. So the master plan was approved by ordinance. The ball field was approved by resolution.
Okay.
So in the development agreement, we could do both, or we might bring forward the master plan extension by ordinance and the lease extension by resolution. And I'm working with the city attorney on the most efficient way to make that happen.
Okay. Well, I will leave it up to the city attorney. Personally, I would like to see it separated, keep it separate, in case we have to adjust the one, then we don't have to go through the master plan again.
I can tell the City Council that as of tonight, I am planning to bring the recreational facilities lease extension to you in a resolution, which would be separate from an approval of the development agreement by ordinance.
Great. Thank you.
No further questions? So Chair will entertain a motion approving further review of potential development agreement with Bastyr University. Is there a motion?
So moved.
And I'll second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, clerk, please take the roll.
Deputy Mayor Van Ness?
Yes.
Councilmember Sperry?
Yes.
Councilmember Herbig?
Yes.
Mayor Baker?
Yes.
Councilmember Danuski?
Yes.
5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is the March 2015 financial report for the City of Kenmore. Ms. Sprague, our Finance and Administration Director. I know. Haven't seen that in a long time.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Baker, council members. Tonight I'm pleased to present the city's financial position as of March 31st, 2015. First, I'm happy to report that we closed the 2013-14 budget period with much better than anticipated results. We began the biennium with a fund balance reserve of about $5.5 million and ended with a fund balance of 4.2, even though we transferred $2.5 million to the Strategic Opportunities Fund. When we were preparing the budget for 2015 and 16, I had projected we'd have a fund balance of about $3.5 million, so that's a big improvement up to another 4.2. Our plan was, and it still is, to transfer about $800,000 to the Strategic Opportunities Fund, which was the excess over our target fund balance of $2.6 million. And during the next budget amendment discussion, Council can direct if even more should be transferred due to the favorable ending fund balance at 2014. Although, as a reminder, a couple $100,000 may be needed to be reserved for 522 as we move forward. But in summary, the general fund was in a very good financial position at the close of the 2014 year. In the first quarter of 2015 has been stable. Revenues are as expected or even a little bit better, especially the sales tax and development fees. Sales tax is benefiting from new development and construction, and it's gratifying to see on the development graph on page 3 that the monthly revenues have risen to a level that we haven't experienced since 2007. And although only 8% of the total general fund budget revenue has been realized, remember that property tax is cyclical, and we'll see the first significant receipts in April. General fund expenses, as of March, are about 6.7% of the budget, and low for a couple of reasons. The 2015 police contract is $3.1 million, and it isn't until May or June that we receive an invoice that covers the first several months of the year. Once we receive that, the police budget will smooth out. And also, we haven't yet recorded any of the $1 million interfund transfers from the general fund. But on the other hand, you might notice that several departments are running a little bit ahead of budget, particularly the City Council and Finance. And this is because, due to the priority-based budgeting concept that we adopted for the biennium, The non-departmental expenditures were reallocated to operating departments like the council, the city manager's department, and finance. So many of the intergovernmental dues and association memberships are now paid from the council budget at the very beginning of the year. And in finance, the annual liability and property insurance is paid out of the finance budget. So there are some front-end expenses that are annual in nature that are paid early in the year, but these will smooth out over the year too. So in other funds, particularly the capital funding sources like impact fees and real estate excise tax, the year-end projections were pretty close to our expectations. With the city's ambitious capital improvement program, these resources are projected to be drawn down pretty close to the wire during this 2015-16 biennium. But revenues to date this year are looking strong, and maybe we will be surprised with some unexpected bumps in receipts. As of March, we had $21 million in cash and investments, with interest rates still hovering about 1/10%. With that, I'll close my comments, submit my report for your acceptance, and take any questions if you have them.
Questions? Councilmember Sperry.
Well, it's always good to hear from you. I really appreciate all the work you do to make this come out. So I won't say happy times are here again, but we can see things, a lot of construction around. And I noticed that we had a nice boost in our retail sales. Do you have any sense of, is that mostly construction related? Or, I mean, it seemed like there was a little mix of both retail sales and construction.
What's nice to see is that retail sales is trending upward.
Wow, that's great.
If you compare it to, during the recession, there was a downward trend, and now it seems to be even coming out of that and exceeding it. But new construction in the city is definitely contributing to sales tax. So across the street. And,
sure.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. It just helps to know if it's more like one time, a big project, or
right.
But it sounds like we've got some positive trends in both directions.
Yes, and retail has been stable. The nature of our retail base is very stable. So it didn't dip a lot during the recession, but now it seems to be growing at a very slow pace.
Thank you.
So growing is good.
Any other questions? Hearing none, the Chair will entertain a motion to accept the financial report. Is there a motion?
So moved.
And I'll second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. Clerk, please take the roll.
Councilmember Mayor Baker?
Yes.
Councilmember Danuski?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Van Ness?
Yes.
Councilmember Sperry?
Yes.
Councilmember Herbig?
Yes.
5-0.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is a discussion of Parks and Transportation funding evaluation by Burke and Associates. Mrs. Overlease, our Public Works Director and City Engineer. Absolutely.
Yeah, why don't let's switch. Yes, please.
Good evening, Mayor Baker and Council. This evening, we're here to talk to you about our Parks and Transportation Improvements Community Conversation Process. We haven't come up with a cute name for it yet. If you have any ideas, we'll be happy to take them. We have our larger interdisciplinary team up here, and also Debbie Bent's included, but ran out of chairs. But I thought we'd actually reintroduce ourselves as staff and our consultant team, and then we'll go for it. So I'll start with Allegra. Sure.
Good evening. I'm Allegra Calder. I'm with Burke Consulting. I'm one of the principals there. And I actually do remember many of you from almost a year, I guess, I spent up here working with Nancy and Mayor Baker and Councilmember Van Ness and Sperry on the Economic Development Plan, I guess 2008 and 9. So since then, we've been working with a variety of communities, but really happy to be back working with you all.
And again, Chris Overlease, and I'm the technical lead on this project with contracting, but by no means am I going to do this project alone.
My name is Natasha Fado. I am with Burke. Have been at Burke for 10 years now and led a number of different kinds of projects. Would be the project manager for this and very excited to get going.
Gregory, part of the city team.
Leslie Harris, part of the city team.
All right, so we're going to go for it. So you may recall during the budget process last year that we had a conversation about the community's desire for parks and transportation projects. And that came out of a former park survey that was done with the community. And also, you'll remember late last year, we adopted the transportation element of the comprehensive plan that had 20 years worth of projects, even though we were only, we could only program 6 years in the CIP. And we also had our pedestrian safety committee that looked at the whole city and different projects and different recommendations. So all of those things combined gave us the idea of having a community conversation about what, if any, projects the community would like to fund beyond our existing revenue streams. Now, the project, I call it a project now, but this project that we're embarking on, we gave it a budget of $250,000, and that is to fund the community conversation process that we're here to talk about tonight, and also to do any more other research that we might need to do. We retained Burke to help us. Natasha, as she mentioned, is our project lead to help us through this process. So tonight we're not asking for council to adopt anything. We really are asking, we want to have a conversation with you. We're asking for your guidance and feedback. And we actually have at the end of the presentation some specific questions we'd like to talk to you about. And I'm going to talk about the project objectives, and I'll turn it over to Natasha to talk through the rest of the presentation. But our project, what we would like to do with our community conversation is to just that, engage the community in a conversation about what improvements are wanted. We want to create a community wish list, and we might, say, here's our starting point, is our transportation element, our parks element, and comp plans. So we have lists of projects, but we don't want that to be restrictive, so we can add things to that as well. And then with the community's help, we'll narrow that wish list down to a list of projects that we're interested in funding. And we will, at the end of the process, we see ourselves having a list of projects that are a specific list that actually have developed budgets and scopes. And we also want to talk about different funding options. And we're not going to get into the detail tonight, but we did attach City Manager Rob Carr-Lindsay's memo that he wrote to Council last year that just kind of big picture talks about what different funding options might be available to us. And you'll hear us keep saying, using the language, should we choose to go out and try to find additional resources for projects. So there is no pre-gone conclusion, at least amongst staff, that we're going to go beyond looking at a list of projects, but I think it's a possibility. So again, we're going to be looking at funding options as part of our project and the community's appetite for funding projects. So with that, I'll turn it over to Natasha.
Great, thank you, Chris. So it's good to come on the heels of the Sound Transit presentation, because now we can, we're going from big regional picture back to local and looking at what can you do in the community to serve the citizens in terms of parks and transportation. We're really looking for direction from you on some scoping elements. So how do we go about asking the community for feedback, and how do we time this, especially considering that there may be some measures on the ballot, potentially. So I'm just going to kind of give a preview and say that we're going to talk a little bit about potential ballot dates, election dates, and using that kind of as bracket for our conversation in terms of timing. But also we wanted to just give you a preview of some of these potential project elements. As Chris mentioned, community engagement is the biggest part of it. It's really having these community conversations and trying to figure out a good creative way to do it, so to get citizens engaged in different ways possible, online, in person, whatever it is, phone surveys, could be phone surveys in different junctures of the process, and that's the last bullet here in terms of polling, focus groups. There are many different ways to do it, and that's part of what we'll be talking about, is what's the best way to go about it. So also funding options development, as Chris mentioned, is a big part of it. We're not probably going to end up with one funding option, or we may, but likely it could be a combination of different funding options, depending on whether it's parks and transportation together, even separate. There may be different projects. There may be some funding that could come from the election, whether it's levy lid lift or even Metropolitan Parks District, whatever it is. And there may be other options that are not necessarily, that you don't have to go out to vote. But we can talk about that as we figure out the list of projects. And then cost estimating is another piece. Part of our team is we have sub-consultants on our agreement. We have Holbach and Baird. They're landscape architects. And we also have Fair and Pierce, and they are transportation planning and engineering firms. So they can provide any estimates that are needed for any projects that haven't been really talked about in detail already.
And I'd like to quickly clarify. So Burke is right now working with us to have this conversation with council tonight, and then to actually write down and create a written strategy. And once we do that, we would come back to council to approve their larger contract. So just to clarify, Natasha is talking about our team partners, but they're technically not under contract yet.
Right.
So.
Yes, thank you for clarifying that. Yes, so that's what I said when I meant. Well, that's what I meant when I said we're scoping this. We're coming here to have a conversation with you, so we can get direction from you on figuring out how to go about this project. So can we go next? Oh, perfect. Thank you. So as I mentioned, in terms of the time frame, we thought that looking at the election schedule could be a good way to kind of bracket the time frame. You may or may not go out for public vote, but it's a good way to think about it. So we've done some research into that, and it's pretty typical to allow for about 10 to 12 months between starting with this process and figuring out the list of projects, and then writing up, getting the community engaged, writing up the description, adopting the resolution, and then filing for election, and then going out into election season. So it's fairly typical to allow that much time. And then, as you know, there are 4 elections in calendar year. There are 2 there's a general election, primary, and 2 special elections. And special elections are a little bit more limited. Not everything can be on the ballot during those elections. So just something to keep in mind. Always matters what other measures are on the ballot. So we can't know right now what might be on the ballot in November 2016. But, we will be, it's something to watch. And as the time gets closer, it's good to evaluate whether it makes sense to go for that specific election date or not. And then we did a little bit of research to try to figure out, is it better to go out for election in August? Is it better to go in November, April? And there's not very clear pattern. MRC, Municipal Research and Services Center, did some analysis of the data, and they haven't come up with a very clear guideline either. So it's kind of nice, actually, because it opens up different possibilities. And then depending on what else is out there.
The only thing I guess I would add to that is that I think one of the things that makes it so hard to tell is there a best time to do it is that every community is different. And so what are you voting for are you a community that's willing to pay for things? Is what you're being offered to pay for, does that make sense to you? And so I think whether or not we go out or not, the point of having the community conversations is to be pretty aligned with where the community, what the things they would want to fund, how they might want to pay for it. And so I think the best kind of hedge against what's a fair amount of uncertainty is pretty close conversation with the community.
So in this little bit of research we've done so far to help with scoping, we looked at 3 potential schedules to bracket this time frame. So we looked, and the next 3 slides basically show those schedules. So we looked at what might the process look like if we looked at April 2016 election, and that would be a special election. What would it look like if we looked at August 2016 primary and November 2016 general election? And of course, that's a presidential election, so usually has the highest voter turnout, which may be good or bad, depending on what else is on the ballot. But so these 3 schedules, we can go through them pretty quickly. What I want to say is we think the best course of action might be to be thinking about August or November 2016 election because they're less limiting. April is coming up actually kind of sooner than we think. I mean, it's summer now, and the schedule gets pretty compressed, and then you're also limited. You couldn't do a lid lift if you so chose to go that direction. So I would say April is potentially doable, probably not the best. And then the next 2, I think, are fairly reasonable schedules, and we looked at them in terms of potential tasks, and you can see that if you look at the activities on the left. We're not bound to have these specific activities, but I think they're all pretty important to go through in terms of getting the community, preparing for community engagement, getting the community engaged, developing list of projects, developing cost estimates, figuring out what funding options are, and so on. There's probably an advantage to kind of shoot for the August 2016 election, and then you might have time if you needed to extend it to November, depending on what else is on the ballot at that time. If you so choose, once again, I keep underlining it, same as Chris, to go out for public vote, which that is not certain at all. But I think it's a fairly reasonable time frame to get through the engagement process through probably, I mean, if we look at the schedule right now, we would get the outreach and hold public meetings and select projects probably through the end of the year. So we would have another 6 months, and then we'd probably have a good idea of what kind of projects in terms of parks and transportation improvements your citizens might want to see. Anything?
Councilmember Herbig, you had it. Yes.
So on this chart, I see outreach and hold public meetings, and I see select projects, and I see voter poll. Maybe tell me your thought on why you would use vote polling after selecting the projects rather than using it to help inform that, because I worry that the open houses will be full of folks who kind of self-select, who are excited about it.
Yeah.
The people who are against it or who have concerns aren't going to show up primarily to an open house and let that be known. So I'm just kind of curious what you're thinking is there.
Great question. Actually, we would think that you could do polling twice. And the first activity is develop and administer survey. So that would be a polling as well. So it would be an independent poll where you could take that temperature of what projects would be important. The second point of polling, down the road, is to take the temperature of the voters. Would they vote for specific measures potentially? So once you narrow down the list of the projects, is there a good chance that this kind of ballot measure would succeed? So it's a different type of polling that they do.
Thank you very much.
I'll go 3.
Yep.
Deputy Mayor.
You've mentioned parks and transportation issues. Have you given any thought to whether the city should pursue funds for the 2 of them together or separately, and advantages and disadvantages to that?
Yeah, good question. I think it's good to keep it open right now. We've talked about that. We've done a little bit of research into that. MRC, when they did their trend analysis, said that when two measures are on the ballot together, they're slightly less successful. They tend to be less successful, so they suggest separating them out. I think it really depends on the projects, and it seems to be appropriate to not limit ourselves from the get-go to shooting for one or the other or both, but really to understand what the community wants and then figure out the best way from there. Anything else?
Councilmember Sperry?
We should just go to questions.
So why, I guess here's, all of the research shows that two ballots or two subjects, single subject ballot measures work the best. And to me, it seems like these need to be on separate tracks. They need to be separated out. The other thing is we've never gone to the voters for anything. And we've talked for years about doing a parks levy, and parks levies, I think, have that tangible nature. If you say transportation, that means, get me across the bridge faster. It means so many things to so many people. It doesn't have that tangible thing. So really the question I would want to know sooner rather than later is, are people more likely to go for parks type projects than transportation type projects? And if they were both put on the ballot at the same time, what would that do? Because I really feel like that's important to really focus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that we will look into that. But I also wanted to say that in terms of everything we've seen in terms of the transportation, it tends to be the most successful when the projects are very concrete. So if you can go out to voters and say, we're going to be funding these kinds of improvements instead of just we'll figure it out later. Mm-hmm. In my understanding, it can be as successful as the ballot measures mm-hmm. that have concrete parks improvements or ball fields or so on. So it's really about.
I understand what you're saying about concrete, and maybe this will come out in the research. But we've never asked for anything at this point, and the work that our city manager did for us, we have an issue because if we went for parks or we went for safety improvements for the transportation, we need to do both the capital and the operating. Mm-hmm. So, if we did everything, we would be looking at 4 ballot measures. Mm-hmm. And I don't know about you, mm-hmm. but what I find is that that's too much. And so then you go to the no reactions. I want this to be successful. This is a lot of money, and this is a lot of time, and this is a lot of effort. Yeah. And so I just want to do what we can at the beginning to ensure that. And I think keeping these issues separate, but also testing it to see if people are asked for both, that to me is a really key question.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilmember Danuski.
Thanks for coming out. I think it is really, really important to make sure that we get these surveys and everything out to the broader community. We've got a great group of people that come to meetings, but it's just a teeny tiny fraction of the city, and mm-hmm. we really need to know the temperature of everybody. So I'm glad to see that we're doing a lot of that. Mm-hmm. That's going to be important for success. And then, do you guys have any read on presidential elections, and if many voter-approved things are thrown on that, and presidential elections seem to be full of that, and if people just start saying no, is it better to go for August before everybody has got this other list? Do you have any read on that kind of stuff?
No, I am not sure. I would say that we'll do more research on that. We're not election consultants. We work more with engaging with the public and trying to figure out how to do different financing methods, and then we work with different ballot initiatives, but that's not, there are specific people that all they do is consult for election measures and different races. So we are certainly happy to find out about that if you want to know. I think it's a good question to ask, definitely. So thank you. We'll do more research on that.
Any other questions?
And the questions we wanted to ask you as well is...
Before we do it, we have one more.
Oh, yeah, I didn't see that.
You sure you
Please,
wanna
go
wait?
ahead.
Okay.
So my understanding is when you start with projects, it's sort of like, hey, what do you want, that kind of thing. And one thing, most of us want a lot, but we don't necessarily want to pay for it. So I would hope that there would be some, ask the question, but then also say, okay, this is what's planned and this is what's already in the work. And then if you want more than that, then go there. But I think that step of talking about what's already in the works is important for people.
Mm-hmm.
So, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Great.
Anything else? Go ahead.
Okay, so thank you for your feedback already, and also wanted to see if you have any other guidance for us as we're thinking about this, and what role in the process would you like to play? Is that something that we should come back and provide you with briefings, which of course we will, but do you want to have a more active role? Also, what do you think about potential citizen advisory committee for this? And it's getting people on board. They could be champions in the community around this effort, but it also takes some effort to organize and keep up with it. So just wanted to get your sense on these questions.
Comments? I know I've taken a couple classes with the Association of Washington Cities where we've talked about election time schedule.
Mm-hmm.
What's the best time to go if we're going to do it? Mm-hmm. And I've always been told that April is good, February is good, because you get the consistent voters who know what they want and they show up. So that's just been my experience from a couple of classes.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
So, and personally, I think we shouldn't rule out anything at this point. I think we should look and see what the community wants.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm not necessarily adverse to dreaming big, so I think it's up to the public. What does the public want? I know Oklahoma City's done some stuff with a couple of initiatives. I think they've called a MAP or something, where they have been projects that have been demonstrated to the public could be something fun, something the public will really enjoy, and they've delivered. And they've gone back for 2 or 3 iterations on it and been funded every time, because they have actually produced stuff that's been fun. So
great. We'll look into that. Great.
And I just add there were some questions about the elements that were on the schedule. Councilmember Herbig had, some thoughts on that. And, again, those are just sort of our preliminary thoughts based on some elements we think would be in there. But this is where we'd also be looking for feedback from you if you've seen things in the community that work or pieces you'd want to make sure were included. That's where we'd love comments as well.
Deputy Mayor.
Thanks. The perception I have of the public desires, one of them we heard from Mr. Levy tonight on the parks and active parks and ball fields and that sort of thing. But the other division, we talk about transportation, but I don't think we're talking about highways and bridges. I think we're talking more about sidewalks. That what will really motivate the citizens of Kenmore, and with our recent tragedies that we've had here, the public, I think, can be motivated to get behind whatever kind of revenue package we come up with for the sidewalk situation, to accelerate our build-out of sidewalks in this rural community that we have, as well as active parks. There are large groups of people that are really interested in these things moving forward. But you do have to have the projects that they want, not just what we think we want, what we think they want. So, yes, we need to go to the public and find out. But sidewalks are a big thing, and safe routes along walking routes and bicycle things and so on.
Anything else? Councilmember Sperry?
So, and your first question about what time frame makes sense for Kenmore, I would support the aiming for August of 2016 with the understanding that, obviously we don't know for sure we're going to put anything out for ballot, but that it could go to November. We did hear from Sound Transit that there's a possibility that they would also have a measure on that, and of course we would know much sooner. But August seems like a good time to vote for parks, so anyway. That would be, in terms of just scheduling, that would be my thought.
Thank you. What role do you see council playing in this process besides us coming giving you briefings? Or is that, if that's kind of the extent of the involvement that you would like?
Councilmember Herbig, you got thoughts?
I was going back to the time frame. I was just going to second what Councilmember Sperry said. I think aiming for August makes sense with the ability to push it back. I do worry about what's going to be on the ballot, though, in November 2016. The presidential year will bring more revenue accepting folks to the ballot box, but if you add on Sound Transit, and who knows what else will be there, that's
too much.
But we'll know in time which way we need to go there. I'm not sure about how the council can be involved. I personally would like to be as involved as possible, and I think you'd mentioned a citizen commission earlier, or citizen advisory board or something. I think that's a really essential part to putting together a successful revenue package, because you need to have people on the ground who are excited and talking to their neighbors and doing that sort of outreach. And without that group put together, it's going to be hard to form it on the outside. So I would be very supportive of going that route, even though I know the additional work that entails. I'd be interested to hear what you were asking, how council could be involved. I'd be interested to hear what options you would see for how council could be involved beyond just hearing briefings, because I'm very interested in helping out. But
yeah, I mean, I think you certainly could, if there was an advisory committee involved, you could have someone who would sort of be, like a non-voting ex officio member who would just sort of participate in the process and potentially just be listening to how those conversations were going. I think the roles as well would be potentially in some of the outreach, doing events and finding other ways actually potentially to do those events. I think people talked about the same people coming out, and the Department of Transportation at the City of Seattle recently tried something where they had, council members and the department director just, having appointments at different Starbucks around the city at different hours of the day. So there's sort of people are trying some different things, and that would be something where maybe a council member could come with a staff member and just kind of have a community conversation that way. So it's really more just kind of hearing from you. I mean, that's really more enough that we would want to hear Councilmember Herbig in terms of, yes, I'd like to help. I think there are ways in which we can help you help out, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Deputy Mayor?
I think there are legal restrictions on what we can do. I think
Yes.
in the preliminary process of identifying projects, and what would be included in any revenue package, or determining what kind of revenue package, be it levy lid lift, bond issue, whatever. I think the council ought to be involved in those kinds of decisions. But when it comes time to go to the ballot, we can't be campaigning.
Yes. No, you can't.
And staff can't be campaigning.
Yeah.
But what the city does, as I understand it, is provide all the facts.
Yes.
These are the projects.
Exactly
This is what we want to do. This is how much this is going to cost.
Yeah.
So on, just the facts. And then we have to rely on our citizens and motivating, them motivating themselves and getting a campaign committee together to really push it. But we can't do that.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
We were wondering more around the community conversation and narrowing down the project phase of it.
So I think we'd all like to be part of that.
Excellent.
Whatever way we can be.
It's good to hear the enthusiasm and everyone that seems to be fired up about it. So it's great.
Councilmember Herbig.
Quick question for the city attorney. I just want to make sure that in my off time, not sitting behind this dais, I can in fact help the ballot measure if it goes to the ballot.
You're correct.
Okay, thank you.
But you have to state that it's your personal view. Of course.
Councilmember Sperry, do I see you want?
Oh, we were just talking about what role in the process, and obviously I'm very willing to help, and I think you heard that too. So I don't know if you're familiar, but I haven't participated, but twice a month we already have coffee with council, and those have been, a couple times I've gone, those have been really productive.
Great.
And so, and I think there's a pretty strong tradition of us attending any kind of community meetings and things like that. So,
Great. Are there any particular community engagement mechanisms you've seen lately that you think would be great to use for this? And we're trying different things all the time, but we also keep hearing now from many people, like Oklahoma or other places, that they've tried, this interesting way to get through to the citizens. Is there anything that's coming to mind that you would want to suggest?
Well, certainly any event where the public is invited where there's food.
Food is key.
It's always a big draw to get people in.
Yes.
And also, I think there are surrounding communities, Shoreline for one, who had a very successful Parks Bond measure fairly recently. And to find out how they did it. I mean, we don't want to just, in Kirkland too?
Yeah.
Yeah. So those that have been successful, we don't need to figure it all out ourselves. There's
great
information out there.
Councilor Herbig.
On the flip side, we should also look at places like Lake Forest Park where they did this in a fairly disastrous manner and learn from them so that we don't.
And Bothell.
And Bothell as well.
And Bothell,
Councilor Sperry.
So you're asking about engagement. We have a pretty connected community. We've got some Facebook groups that are pretty specific to Kenmore and that kind of stuff. So anything that's shareable is really important, I think, to our to the outreach. The other thing I think you mentioned in here is the pull pads, I think where you call it, and I really like that idea because if people do come to the meeting, there's some people are more comfortable talking and some people aren't. And I just think that's a wonderful way to get a real temperature of people. And people probably like that too, because then you can, it's where you do those, push a button and you get a response and everybody sees it. I think those.
Instant feedback.
Have you had good those? People like that. They like to push buttons. So.
Yeah. Then they're curious to see where other people are.
Sure.
So as you say, especially early on in a conversation, you can have some different conversations when you have a sense of what the people in the room are thinking. So.
Yeah. We were also thinking it might be fun to integrate some interactive mapping into this somehow, since it's such a, we're talking about concrete list of projects, and we're talking about specific geography. So we're going to think about ways to do that potentially. Anything else?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Terrific feedback.
So I think we'll be, when do you know next steps?
Yeah, so our next steps will be taking this information and conversation and then working with Natasha's team to actually lay out the strategy and then put a scope and fee to that, and then come back to council in July with Burke's scope and fee with that strategy attached. So you can see it written down and the time frame and then scope and fee attached.
And in the meantime, we'll try to get answers to some of your questions.
And would the scope, would the scope and fee include the subcontractors mentioned?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you.
Next item, staff reports. Ms. Owsley, anything?
Just very briefly, Mr. Mayor. And
Leave the
Council.
monitors up if you guys would.
Pardon me?
Just leave the monitors up for right now.
Yeah, stop it.
As we mentioned earlier, there will be a community meeting on the 17th from 7 to 8 p.m. Centering on ST3. And I believe that some of the council members are planning to go to some of the Sound Transit-sponsored community meetings over the next couple of weeks, too. So Rob will be in touch with you about that. The June 29th tentative meeting time that we discussed, we'll want to be in touch with you to make sure that who's available that evening. We want to do that at 5:30 that evening because of the event at Bastyr that night as well. And just a couple things with the podium in front of you, can't see very well, but we have concluded a week plus of food trucks every day, and they did very, very well in the Kenmore Village parking lot. And thanks to Brennan Jernigan for really pulling that whole effort together. And I believe they just left, but the couple that was in the back row for the meeting, if you haven't met them, I was going to introduce them to you and put them on the spot, but it's Bill and Jen Boyd, and we have been working with them really over the last couple of months or so. They are looking to begin a business in Kenmore called Cairn Brewing. They've rented the first floor of the building where Kenmore Business Incubator is, which is, I got to tell you, a very popular idea with the people upstairs. So I think some of the stairways are going to get more traffic. So that is all that I have. Leslie, I didn't realize you were going to be.
She's not. She's helping me.
Oh, that's right.
All right.
Great.
Thank you. Mr. City Attorney.
Mr. Baker, Mayor Baker, I have an answer to the development agreement question.
Okay.
5 council members must approve an ordinance approving a development agreement.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Takes 5. All right. Comments, reports, initiatives. Councilmember Sperry.
Well, thank you. I feel privileged. I get to get started first here. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, first of all, I just thank you to the staff. Every time I read the weekly newsletter, I'm always amazed at all the things that happen. And one of the things I was really thrilled to see was that the Arrowhead crosswalk, that it sounds like there's a good solution moving forward with that. And I know that took a lot of time and effort to get there. So I appreciate that very much. The second thing is going back to our meeting at 5:30 on the 29th, and I can't depend on the traffic, so I would be on the dot or a few minutes late. And so one of the questions came up is if we need to vote, if we can vote by phone, you know, how we can have we can call in. And I thought that the voting is part of that, right?
I always thought it was too.
Yeah, so just so we could double check on that, I just don't want there to be any, I mean, when I spoke with, right, when I spoke with the city manager, he seemed a little surprised by that, so I just want to clarify, because we have people out of the country, we have people that, are trying to get here from the east side, and so I certainly, don't want to say we got hung up in traffic and we couldn't pass something or vote. That would be not a good thing, so anyway. So I'll be here, or I'll be talking to you in my car.
Councilmember Herbig.
Nothing to report.
Councilmember Danuski.
I was curious if there's any next steps for the food trucks. They were quite popular, and everybody wants more.
I think we're going to see more of them. I don't know specifically what the plan is, but as you know, my personal favorite, Maximus Minimus, that it's very clever design. They were here last Monday. That was scheduled, and they sold out so quickly that they came back today for an extra day. So we'll be checking on that. I think they have seen that Kenmore is a pretty hospitable place, and so it's a fun thing to be doing. And why not do it during the summer when people are around?
I think a key on that is getting those Facebook events out there.
Right.
Is really key.
Right.
Deputy Mayor.
Thanks. As I mentioned, the mayor and I were down in Salt Lake City this last week, and kind of bummed out that they missed the food trucks, but I'm glad they're coming back. And we got there today, yeah. Saw the big black pig and had a good pork sandwich. So I'm excited about that, and it'll be a fun thing, but we do need to publicize it so people know about it. Of course, when you drive by Kenmore Village and you see the big black pig sitting in the parking lot, you want to find out what that's all about. And a lot of people did. Glenn and Ruth Rogers stopped by, just driving by, and had a sandwich. So I think it's great. The meeting down Salt Lake I thought was very productive. We had a similar meeting back in St. Paul last year that there was not a lot of time scheduled to discuss policy. National League of Cities policy is set by the different committees in the various subject areas. And I'm on the Transportation Infrastructure Committee, and we had a lot of time to discuss the national policy and changes in it, maybe changes in some emphasis, a little more with the pedestrian and bicycle transportation modes as well as rail and highways and air. It was a very productive meeting, and from a standpoint of discussing the National League of Cities policy, but also in communicating with our counterparts who have interests in these fields from across the country. And as I mentioned earlier, on the University Communities Committee, I was stunned by some of the problems that people have with schools in their cities and the conflicts. When you have half your population and maybe half the geographic area or more is tax exempt, they're not contributing to the revenue of the city, yet the city has to service all their needs, and there are a lot of conflicting things that a lot of cities have to deal with. But there were also a lot of positive things that came out of it, that cities are doing. The city of Ogden works very closely with Weber State University, and some great projects that they're doing together. And maybe there's some of those kinds of things that we can do here. The Town and Gown Association, International Town and Gown Association, we heard tonight that David, our mayor, and Dr. Church have been to the Town and Gown Association meeting, made a presentation, but we're not members of it. And I really think we ought to be. And I don't know what the costs are involved in it. I asked Nancy about it earlier tonight, and I think we should look into it. And I don't know, does a university also join it as well? And you sort of sign up as a team. And we might pair up also with University of Bothell and Cascadia, because they're in our community. They just happen to be in the city of Bothell. I'm not thinking about getting all those big rocks with the bronze plaques on them. When Bothell put those in, as soon as they started digging to construct UWB, I looked at those things and I said, what's this all about? It really looked kind of tacky to me. But, that identifies them as a university or a college town, and it's a relationship between the two. But I think it'd be worthwhile for the city to pursue that. There are a lot of benefits from that kind of an organization. The light rail in Salt Lake is an amazing thing. They put that together in a hurry before the Olympics, but they are still been working on it and extending lines, and it's very well used. And they did some creative financing to move it along faster than it seems like we're going here with Sound Transit. It was interesting. And Salt Lake City was a great host for this meeting. We were in a nice hotel there. It was an experience, a really good experience, and always. So, David, what did I miss?
Light rail was really good because I was able to save a ton on cab fares. We had free passes for the time we were there, so I was able to take it from the airport to the hotel and from the hotel back to the airport.
That pass didn't go until Saturday.
And even though it was that way, it was only $2, so very reasonable fare. So, any event. I was asked to do something for Kaboom, the organization that we're involved with. They asked me to put together this, and so I shot some video and I did some recording, and this is the result. This is its debut.
Kenmore, Washington is one of many cities across the United States competing to attract and retain residents. Kenmore has identified that to be a destination of choice, we have to be child and family friendly. Kenmore has been chosen by Family Circle magazine as one of the top 10 cities in the USA to raise a family. Kenmore has also been designated as one of the best cities in the region to raise a family and start a business by business publications in the Pacific Northwest. In making Kenmore child and family friendly, we focused on embracing playability by making all activities in the city accessible to kids and families. We've made it easy and fun for all families to access Lake Washington and the Sammamish River to take advantage of the many programs we offer on the water. We're also planning to create a town green using discovery and play as important design components. There will be interactive water features, hot rocks for sitting and climbing, and grassy areas for running or just relaxing. Over the last couple of years, we've seen that residents are wanting to move to, stay longer, and raise their families here in Kenmore. We believe our efforts to embrace playability are an important part of that. We are proud to be recognized as Playful City USA Community for the 6th year in a row.
I wrote part of it, yes. So anyway, we had help from Kaboom. I certainly didn't do it all. I didn't do the editing. They did the editing. And that was a little preview. It's going to be released nationwide, and they're going to feature it on Wednesday. So anyway,
We'll get to teach him to pronounce Washington.
I know you do. I knew I was going to hear that. I knew I was
in Washington.
I know, it's Washington. Okay. Nancy, you had something?
Mr. Mayor and Council, I just looked up on the Town and Gown website, a joint university-city membership is $800.
Okay. Just a couple of more things here. As you all know, Councilmember Brent Smith is off on an adventure. I've been following him on his blog. A few days ago, I think about the 9th or so, he had posted some stuff about some fun things he's found on the trail that we really need to incorporate here in Kenmore. One is a mammoth picnic table. These tables are thick concrete and have room to seat about 26 people. I thought that might be good in our parks. Some touchable and weatherable art. There was some pack animals and some other statues made out of steel that had been cut out of steel plate that you could test and touch, and it was weathered and whatever. He thought that would be nice. A bicycle washing station he thought was good. So he thought that was a really good idea. And then he was thinking a store-on. He thinks a store-on would be good, and this would be a new Kenmore-specific bird that's a result of a cross between breeding our local herons and storks from Spain. So he was thinking of a new species of bird called store-on would be good to have here.
See, I look back at bicycles. I was like, okay, you're stored on something, and I was like, not even in the same thing.
And then he was also saying that a new bridge over the Sammamish River with some character, similar to the bridge that I saw in Kenmore, Scotland, you know, built in the 1600s. He thought that would be good here in Kenmore. So far to date, they have walked 360 miles. Now, Brenda, unfortunately, has come down with thrombosis in her leg. She's had to give up walking. She cannot fly for 10 days. So their trip home is still good, but they went to a local doctor. They've gotten medication. It's getting better. She's not walking. Brent's walking. She took a bus a few towns ahead to sort of relax and take it easy. And Brent's walking the Camino to catch up. Maximus Minimus was here today. I was the first customer today. Talked to the truck owner, and he says he wants to come back every Monday during the summer, at least until they, unless they had a catering event that they had to go to. But they're very pleased with being here in Kenmore. They like it very much, and certainly by the time frame that Sherry and I were there, it was a nice steady stream of people coming in. I enjoyed it last week before I left for Salt Lake, and today I bought 2 sandwiches, and my eyes were bigger than my stomach, and so I just had the second sandwich for dinner tonight. So it was really good. Okay, Kaboom video and announcement. We did that, and I guess with that, we're adjourned.